The council chamber stretched wide like an open sky, filled with beings from 73 different worlds. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few glowed with soft light from within their bodies. They sat in curved rows that rose higher and higher, all facing the center where decisions were made. Ambassador Yuna stood at the human section, her dark suit plain compared to the colorful robes and armor worn by others. Next to her, Captain Minho watched the proceedings with tired eyes. The Valkyrie representative was speaking again, his voice sharp and demanding. He wanted better trade routes through human-protected space but offered nothing in return. This happened often. Other species would ask for human help, receive it, then forget to say thank you. Yuna had stopped counting how many times this occurred. The humans will mediate this dispute, announced the Council Prime, a tall Valkyrie named Velreth. He didn't ask. He simply declared it as fact. Around the chamber, alien heads nodded in agreement. Of course, the humans would fix it. They always did. Yuna stepped forward without hesitation. She had prepared for this, because she always prepared. The solution is simple, she said calmly. The Valkyrie want faster routes. The Thaussians want fair payment for passage through their territory. If the Valkyrie increase their transit fees by 12%, and the Thaussians reduce inspection times by 30 hours, both sides benefit. The chamber fell silent as the translator devices processed her words into 73 languages. Then Velreth nodded once. Acceptable. We shall implement this immediately. He moved to the next topic without acknowledging Yuna at all. She returned to her seat. Captain Minho leaned close and whispered, "That's the 47th time this year." His voice carried no anger, just a statement of fact. 48th, Yuna corrected quietly. Below them, in the engineering levels of the massive station, Sora was fixing another problem that nobody had asked her to fix. The secondary air filtration system in the Quillen sector had been making strange noises for 3 days. The Quillens hadn't reported it because they assumed someone else would notice. Sora noticed because she checked these systems every night after her official shift ended. She crawled through the narrow maintenance tunnel, her tools magnetically attached to her belt. The filtration unit hummed wrong, like a song played in the incorrect key. She found the issue quickly, a worn bearing in the third turbine. It would fail completely in maybe 6 days. The entire Quillen sector would lose clean air. She replaced the bearing with a spare from her personal supply. The station's official inventory had been waiting for replacement parts for 11 months. Sora kept her own stock because waiting meant people could die. She didn't report the repair. Nobody would read the report anyway. In the medical wing, Dr. Taeyang was teaching 3 young Draxian physicians about human surgical techniques. They had asked to learn because human doctors had a strange ability to operate on almost any species. Humans seemed to understand biology in ways other races didn't. Taeyang showed them how to identify arterial patterns in species they'd never encountered before. "You must think like the blood," he explained through the translator. "It always seeks the path of least resistance back to the heart. Find that pattern, and you can find any vessel." The Draxian students watched in fascination as he demonstrated on a practice hologram. They didn't know that Taeyang had spent 15 years developing this technique, testing it on volunteers from 40 different species. He had published his research in the open database where anyone could read it for free. The council had never acknowledged his work, but doctors across 73 worlds used his methods every day. That evening, the human leadership gathered in their private quarters. These rooms were simple compared to the grand suites given to other council members. Humans had requested basic accommodations and used the saved resources to build better medical facilities instead. Nobody had thanked them for that either. "There's going to be a vote tomorrow," Yuna informed the group. "They want to reduce our council seats from 5 to 2. Minho set down his cup of tea. "On what grounds?" "Efficiency," Yuna replied with a bitter smile. "They claim too many small voices slow down decisions." "Small voices," repeated Engineer Junho. "We maintain 60% of this station's critical systems. They don't see maintenance, Sora said quietly. They only notice when things break. Dr. Taeyang crossed his arms. Should we protest the vote? The room fell silent. They all knew protesting would accomplish nothing. The council would express concern, promise to reconsider, then vote exactly as planned. This had happened before with other species who complained too loudly. Those species learned that the council valued silence over objection. No, Yuna decided. We accept it with dignity. And then? And then we stop volunteering for everything. The next day, the vote occurred exactly as Yuna had predicted. Council Prime Velrith presented the motion as a minor administrative adjustment. We must streamline our processes, he declared. Smaller species will maintain 2 representatives. This improves efficiency. ASP. This. And decide. When the vote was called, 61 species voted yes, 8 voted no, 4 abstained. The human delegation sat quietly throughout. When asked if they wished to speak before the vote, Yuna simply said, "No, thank you." After the vote, Velreth smiled at her with what he probably thought was kindness. "You understand this is nothing personal, Ambassador. Merely practical governance." "Of course," Yuna replied with perfect politeness. "We understand completely." They did understand. They understood that their contributions meant nothing to the council. They understood that effort without recognition was simply expected. They understood that they had built the foundation of this station and received not even a nod in return. That night, Minho looked out at the stars from the observation deck. Earth was out there, 37 light-years away. Home, a place where humans didn't have to prove their worth every single day just to be ignored. "How long do we keep building the house for those who won't let us through the front door?" he asked the empty room. The station hummed around him, kept alive by 1,000 human contributions that nobody could see. Air filtered through systems, Sora maintained. Medical wings operated using Taeyang's techniques. Communication arrays ran on algorithms that humans had written and never claimed credit for. Trade routes functioned because humans did the boring, essential work of optimization. Tomorrow, Minho decided, they would stop doing anything they weren't specifically required to do. Nothing extra, nothing generous, just the minimum. He wondered how long it would take for someone to notice. 3 months passed since the council reduced human representation. To most of the alien species on Nexus Prime, everything seemed normal. Ships came and went. Trade continued. The light stayed on and air remained breathable. They didn't notice the small changes happening in the shadows. Engineer Junho walked past the secondary air filtration system in the Valkyrie sector. It was making a grinding noise. Soft, but wrong. Before the vote, he would have stopped immediately to investigate. He would have spent 2 hours diagnosing the problem and fixing it before anyone even knew there was an issue. Now, he kept walking. The filtration system wasn't his responsibility. According to his official job description, he only maintained primary systems in human sectors and emergency backup systems station-wide. Everything else had been voluntary. He'd spent 3 years doing voluntary work, fixing problems before they became disasters. Nobody had ever thanked him. His communicator buzzed. "Junho, the Thausian sector is reporting temperature fluctuations," said a voice from Central Operations. "Have they submitted a formal maintenance request?" Junho asked. "Well, no. But you usually just—" "I need a formal request," Junho interrupted politely. "Route it through proper channels, please." Silence on the other end. Then, "Understood." The request would take 5 days to process through proper channels. By then, the temperature issue would be much worse. But it wasn't Junho's problem anymore. In the medical wing, Dr. Nari was packing her research files. She had spent 7 years studying cross-species viral mutations, work that could save millions of lives. 3 alien medical teams had requested access to her ongoing research. She had denied all 3 requests. "But Dr. Nari," pleaded a young Quillan physician, This research could help us prepare for the next plague season. Then I suggest you conduct your own research, Nari replied, without looking up from her packing. My work is my own. You always shared before. That was before. She sealed the last container. Now, I follow regulations. Research belongs to the researcher, unless they choose to publish. I choose not to publish. The Quillen left, confused and upset. Nari felt a small pain in her chest. She wasn't cruel by nature. Helping others had always brought her joy, but giving and giving while being treated as invisible had worn her down to nothing. She had no more generosity left to give. Station communication arrays required constant adjustment. Quantum fluctuations meant the signal strengths needed tweaking every few hours to maintain clear connections between 73 different worlds. Technician Hyun had been doing these adjustments for 4 years, working extra hours without overtime pay. He possessed an intuitive understanding of quantum patterns that made him exceptional at this work. Last week, Hyun had transferred back to Earth. Nobody knew until the communication arrays started having problems. Signals dropped. Messages arrived garbled. 3 minor colonies lost contact completely for 2 days. The replacement technician, a Draxian named Korth, followed the instruction manual perfectly. But the manual was written for stable quantum conditions. Real space was never stable. Korth didn't have the intuition needed to predict fluctuations before they happened. I'm doing everything by procedure, Korth insisted when his supervisor questioned him. Then why isn't it working? The supervisor demanded. Korth had no answer. The procedure should work. That it didn't made no sense to him. At the council meeting that week, a crisis emerged. A Thausian trade convoy of 17 ships had been attacked by pirates near the Outer Rim. They were calling for help, but the nearest council patrol was 6 hours away. The pirates would be gone in 1 hour. Captain Minho's tactical response team was only 40 minutes from the location. Everyone in the council chamber turned to look at the human section. Captain Minho, Council Prime Velrith said expectantly. Your team can reach them in time. Minho stood slowly. My defense agreement with the council covers human vessels and designated council emergency protocols only. But they're asking for help, Velrith insisted. Then activate the emergency protocol, Minho replied calmly. Submit the proper authorization codes, and my team will respond immediately. That takes 30 minutes to process. Yes, Minho agreed. It does. 17 ships will be lost. Minho's face remained neutral. I sympathize with their situation. However, I'm required to follow protocols. If you'd like to change the protocols, we can vote on it next week. Velreth's face turned dark with anger. You would let them die over paperwork? I would follow the rules that the council established, Minho corrected. If those rules are insufficient, perhaps they should be reviewed. The vote to activate emergency protocol took 37 minutes. By then, the pirates had destroyed 12 ships and fled with cargo from the other 5. 17 ships, total lost. 342 Thausian crew members dead. The Thausian ambassador stood, his body shaking with rage. Why didn't the humans help? They were close enough. Minho remained seated. Our defense agreement is quite clear about response parameters. Your convoy fell outside those parameters until emergency protocol was activated. You always helped before. Before, we volunteered beyond our requirements, Minho said quietly. We no longer do that. Why not? The Thausian demanded. Minho didn't answer. He simply returned his attention to his datapad. Ambassador Yuna watched the confusion spread through the council chamber. Aliens whispered to each other, trying to understand what was happening. The humans had always been so helpful, so eager to assist with every problem. This cold adherence to exact regulations felt foreign and wrong, but it was what the council had asked for, wasn't it? Efficiency, streamlined processes, following proper channels. The humans were simply doing exactly what they were required to do, nothing more, nothing less. Velreth stood at the center, trying to regain control. This is unacceptable behavior. The humans are being petty. Petty? Yuna spoke for the first time that day. We're following the rules, Council Prime. Every single rule that this council voted into existence. You know what I mean, Velreth snapped. I know that for 142 years, humans have gone far beyond our requirements to help this council succeed. Yuna replied, her voice cold as ice. And in that time, we've received 2 official commendations, while watching less capable species receive dozens. We've been told we're too small to deserve full representation. We've been treated as useful tools rather than equal partners. The chamber went silent. So now we are exactly what you apparently wanted, efficient, by the book members who do precisely what our contracts require. Nothing more. Yuna gathered her materials. If you find this insufficient, I suggest you review what our contracts actually say we're required to do. You might be surprised. She left the chamber. Captain Minho and the other human representatives followed without another word. Behind them, the council erupted into argument. But the humans didn't hear it. They were already making plans. That night, 40 human families quietly booked transport ships back to Earth. They told no one. They submitted their departure notices through proper channels and left within the week. The station population decreased by 300 humans. In a station of 2 million beings, this seemed like nothing. But those 300 humans had been teachers, engineers, doctors, and technicians. They had been the people who did small, essential tasks that kept everything running smoothly. It would be another month before anyone noticed what their absence truly meant. 6 months had passed since the vote. The human population on Nexus Prime had dropped from 8,000 to fewer than 5,000. Most of those remaining were packing their belongings and waiting for transport ships. They moved quietly through the station like ghosts, finishing their final contracted days before disappearing into the void. Maintenance Chief Doyun stood in the central engineering hub, surrounded by warning lights. Red indicators blinked across 3 monitoring screens. The quantum communication array, the massive system that connected 73 worlds across the galaxy, had failed completely. How long until we can restore it? Demanded Station Commander Vex, a rigid Draxian military officer who had never worked a day in engineering. Unknown, Doyun replied honestly. We're trying. Trying isn't good enough. We need that array. Operational. 2010. Doyun wanted to explain that the array was impossibly complex. It required understanding quantum field fluctuations across vast distances. It needed intuitive leaps that no manual could teach. Technician Hyun had maintained it perfectly for 4 years, making adjustments that seemed random, but were actually brilliant. Hyun had tried to document his knowledge before leaving, but some skills couldn't be written down. We're doing our best, Doyun said instead. 3 days later, they managed to restore partial function. The array worked at approximately 60% capacity. 12 worlds could communicate. 11 remained in silence, cut off from the rest of the galaxy. Trade routes to those worlds stopped completely. Millions of beings couldn't contact their families. Emergency repair teams from 5 different species had worked around the clock. They'd followed every procedure in the manual. They'd consulted with quantum specialists from the Velkari Science Institute. Nothing helped. The array needed something they couldn't provide: the intuitive human understanding that made the impossible possible. Commander Vex refused to admit defeat. Contact the human technician. Offer him whatever he wants to come back and fix this. The message was sent to Hyun on Earth. His response came back within 2 hours. No, just one word. No explanation. No negotiation. While the Council struggled with communications, a worse crisis emerged on Velkari Prime. A plague had broken out in the capital city. A mutation of a virus that Dr. Taeyang had been studying for 3 years. He'd been close to developing a vaccine when he'd left 6 months ago. The Velkari medical teams tried everything they knew. The plague spread faster than they could contain it. Within 2 weeks, 17,000 people were infected. Within a month, 3,000 had died. Council Prime Velreth called an emergency session. We need the human research on this virus immediately. Ambassador Yuna, attending remotely from Earth now, appeared on the communication screen. What research? Dr. Taeyang's research, Velreth said impatiently. He was studying this exact virus. Dr. Taeyang's personal research belongs to Dr. Taeyang, Yuna replied calmly. It was never council property. But he worked in a council facility. He worked in a human-funded facility that we built on the station. Yuna corrected. His research was his own. He chose not to publish it. Velreth's face twisted with rage. He has no right to withhold information that could save lives. He has every right, Yuna said, her voice cold. Just as the council has the right to reduce human representation and treat us as minor partners. Rights work both ways, Council Prime. This is murder. No, Yuna replied quietly. This is the consequence of your own decisions. You wanted efficiency. You wanted to reduce voices you deemed too small. You got exactly what you asked for. The transmission ended. Velreth stared at the blank screen, finally beginning to understand. Council member Thress, a thoughtful Quillen who'd always respected the humans, had been conducting his own investigation. What he discovered horrified him. He presented his findings to a small group of concerned council members in a private session. The humans weren't just helping occasionally, Thress explained, displaying data on multiple screens. They were the foundation of everything. The numbers were devastating. In the past year alone, humans had prevented 1,247 critical system failures through voluntary maintenance. They'd mediated 89% of all successful dispute resolutions between species. Human medical knowledge had saved an estimated 14,000 alien lives annually, lives that would have been lost without their cross-species treatment protocols. Look at agricultural production, Thress continued, highlighting another chart. Food output in the station's growing domes has dropped 23% since humans stopped managing the soil systems. They weren't required to manage them. They just did it because people needed food. More data appeared. Trade efficiency had dropped 34% without human logistics algorithms. Medical wings were overwhelmed without human doctors consulting on unusual cases. Educational programs had collapsed without human teachers who somehow knew how to explain complex concepts to any species. They were holding everything together, Thress concluded. And we never noticed. Because they did it. Quietly. The small group sat in stunned silence. Can we bring them back? Someone asked. I don't know, Thress admitted. But we need to try. Before they could organize a delegation, the situation deteriorated further. The secondary air filtration system in the Velkari sector, the one Junho had walked past months ago, finally failed completely. 300 residents had to evacuate to emergency shelters. 2 elderly Velkari died from respiratory failure before they could be moved. Then the agricultural domes experienced a catastrophic fungal infection. Without human soil management, the pH balance had shifted slowly over months. The fungus thrived in the new conditions. 40% of the station's food supply was destroyed in 1 week. Trade routes became chaotic without human optimization. Ships arrived at crowded docking stations with no berths available. Cargo sat in warehouses with no transport scheduled. Prices for basic goods tripled. 3 separate conflicts erupted between species that humans used to mediate. Without neutral human negotiators, old grudges reignited. 2 turned into shooting wars in the outer systems. Emergency Coordinator Krell tried desperately to manage the cascading failures. Every time his team fixed one problem, 2 more appeared. They were playing a losing game, trying to patch holes in a dam that was fundamentally broken. Where are the humans? He shouted during one particularly bad day. Why won't they help? His assistant looked at him sadly. They tried to help for 142 years. We just never said thank you. Captain Minho stood in his new office on Earth, watching reports from Nexus Prime, with no satisfaction. He'd hoped they would understand before it got this bad. He'd hoped someone would notice and make changes before people died. But pride was a powerful drug. The council had been addicted to it for so long they couldn't recognize withdrawal symptoms. His communication terminal chimed. An emergency message from Velreth himself, begging for assistance. Minho didn't respond. He simply forwarded it to Ambassador Yuna and deleted it. On Nexus Prime, the quantum communication array dropped to 23% functionality. 34 worlds were now completely isolated. The station population had decreased by 52% as species fled to safer locations. Medical Officer Jisoo, one of the last humans remaining, packed her final belongings. Her contracted time had ended yesterday, but she'd stayed an extra day to transfer critical patient files. Now it was time to go home. She walked through the empty human quarters. So many memories in these halls. So much hope when they'd first arrived, believing they could build something wonderful with the other species. That hope had died quietly over years of being invisible. At the transport dock, she met Doyun. He was the last engineer, having stayed to ensure nothing catastrophically exploded when he left. "Ready?" she asked. "More than ready," he replied. They boarded the transport together. As the ship pulled away from Nexus Prime, Jisoo looked back at the station. It was still beautiful, a massive structure of metal and light floating in the darkness of space. But it was dying now, slowly collapsing under the weight of problems that human hands had once prevented. The transport turned toward Earth, and Jisoo stopped looking back. 2 months after the last human departed Nexus Prime, the station was dying. Not quickly like a ship exploding, but slowly like a plant without water. Every day brought new failures, new problems that nobody knew how to solve. Council Prime Velreth stood in the main chamber, which was now half empty. Many species had withdrawn their representatives, no longer trusting the council to keep them safe. Those who remained looked tired and frightened. "Life support is at 71%, reported Emergency Coordinator Krell. His voice carried the exhaustion of someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. "We've sealed off 15 sections completely. We simply can't maintain atmosphere in those areas anymore." "What about the repairs?" Velreth demanded. "We don't know how to make the repairs," Krell admitted. "The systems are too complex. We've been following human-designed maintenance protocols, but we don't understand why those protocols work. When something unexpected happens, we're lost." Velreth slammed his hand on the podium. This couldn't be happening. They were advanced species, masters of technology and science. How could they be defeated by simple maintenance? But it wasn't simple. That was the problem. The humans had made it look simple through years of quiet expertise. The quantum communication array continued to deteriorate. Only 17 worlds maintained connection now. 56 were in total silence. Trade across the galaxy had collapsed. Species that had depended on imported food faced starvation. Medical supplies couldn't reach colonies that needed them. 3 more civil wars had erupted, bringing the total to 5. Without human mediators, old hatreds burned hot. Species that had lived in peace for decades now killed each other over ancient grievances. Council Member Thress presented his complete report to the remaining council members. The data he'd compiled painted a devastating picture of human contributions that nobody had acknowledged. "In the past 5 years," Thress explained, his voice heavy with regret, "humans mediated 412 conflicts between member species. Their success rate was 93%. Since they left, we've had 27 conflicts. Our success rate in resolving them is 14%. He pulled up engineering data. Human engineers prevented an average of 3 critical system failures per day through proactive maintenance. They identified problems before they became disasters. Since their departure, we've experienced catastrophic failures in life support, communications, water treatment, waste management, power distribution, and navigational systems. Medical statistics appeared next. Human doctors consulted on 6,300 unusual medical cases last year. Cases involving species biology they'd never encountered before. Their diagnostic success rate was 87%. Our best non-human doctors achieve 43% on unfamiliar species. Agricultural data followed. Human soil management increased food production by 31% while using 22% fewer resources. They developed growing techniques specifically optimized for our limited space and diverse nutritional needs. We've lost most of that knowledge. Thress looked around at the assembled council members. They weren't just helping us. They were holding everything together. And we never once said thank you. Well, that's SAO. They were holding everything together. We never once said thank you. Why didn't we see this? Asked a Draxian representative, her voice small. Because they didn't demand recognition, Thress replied. They just did the work. They fixed problems before we knew problems existed. They were invisible because they were so good at what they did. Velreth had been listening in silence. Now he spoke, and his voice carried a defeat that everyone in the room could hear. Can we contact them? Apologize? Offer them anything they want to return? I've tried, Thress admitted. All diplomatic channels to Earth are closed. They're not accepting communications from council representatives. News. Send ships, Velrith ordered desperately. Send a delegation in person. 3 ships were sent to Earth. They were met at the border of human space by a defense fleet. Captain Minho, now holding the rank of admiral, sent a simple message. You are not welcome here. Turn back. The delegation tried to explain their mission. They tried to apologize. They tried to beg. Admiral Minho's response was the same. Turn back. Turn back. Turn. Turn. The ships returned to Nexus Prime empty-handed. The message was clear. Humans were done talking. A formal message arrived from the Human Commonwealth 3 days later. Ambassador Yuna had written it herself. It was brief and cold. For 142 years, humanity served the Galactic Council with dedication and expertise. We built your infrastructure. We solved your problems. We saved your lives. We did this not for glory, but because we believed in the dream of peaceful cooperation among the stars. You reduced our representation. You dismissed our contributions. You treated us as servants rather than partners. When we stopped volunteering beyond our requirements, you called us petty. When we followed your rules exactly as written, you called us cruel. You had a gift, and you threw it away. This station is your responsibility. These problems are your problems. We wish you luck in solving them. Do not contact us again. The message ended there. No signature. No room for negotiation. Just a door closed firmly in their faces. The Velkari economy collapsed completely. Their plague had killed 8,000 people before finally burning itself out. Without human trade route optimization, their merchant fleet couldn't maintain profitable operations. 3 major Velkari corporations declared bankruptcy in 1 week. The Thausian Federation faced famine. They'd relied on food imports managed through human logistics systems. Those systems were gone. 2 of their colony worlds had no food reserves. People were starving. The Quillan worlds experienced a medical crisis. A new mutation of an old disease had appeared. Without human cross-species medical knowledge, their doctors couldn't develop effective treatments. The disease spread across 4 planets. Species began withdrawing from the Council entirely. The Harkoni left first, stating simply that they couldn't trust a council that had let such disaster occur. The Prelian Collective followed within days. Then the Jothian Assembly. Then others. In 6 weeks, the Council lost 19 member species. Those who remained did so only because they had nowhere else to go. Velreth was removed from his position as Council Prime in a vote of no confidence. He didn't fight it. He'd aged 10 years and 3 months. His face lined with stress and shame. He knew this was his failure. He'd been so certain that humans were expendable, so convinced that any species could do what they did. He'd been catastrophically wrong. Council member Thress was elected as the new Council Prime. Nobody else wanted the position. It was like being made captain of a sinking ship. His first act was to call an emergency session of the remaining council members. They gathered in the half-empty chamber, surrounded by failing systems and the ghosts of their own arrogance. "We have a choice," Thress said quietly. "We can let pride kill us, or we can admit we were wrong." "The humans won't even talk to us," someone protested. "Then we'll go to Earth in person," Thress replied. "And we'll wait at their door until they agree to listen. We'll bring them a new charter. Full recognition. Equal partnership. Everything we should have given them from the beginning. What if they still refuse?" Thress looked around at the failing station, at the scared faces of representatives whose worlds were suffering. "Then we'll deserve our fate. But we have to try. We have to admit what we did wrong." Then, the vote was unanimous. They would send a delegation to Earth. They would beg, if necessary. They would offer anything and everything, because the alternative was watching everything they'd built crumble into dust. On Earth, Admiral Minho received word of the Council's decision. He sat in his office overlooking the Pacific Ocean, reading the message that begged for a chance to make things right. He thought about all the humans who'd given years of their lives to the Council. All the innovations shared freely. All the problems solved without recognition. All the quiet dignity in the face of dismissal. He thought about whether forgiveness was possible. Then he forwarded the message to Ambassador Yuna and wrote a single line. "Your decision. The choice belonged to humanity now. And whatever they decided, the galaxy would have to accept it." 8 months had passed since the last human left Nexus Prime. The station operated at 31% capacity now, barely functioning. Most of its population had fled. The once bright symbol of galactic cooperation had become a ghost town floating in the darkness of space. Council Prime Thress stood at the landing pad on Earth, looking up at blue skies he'd only seen in pictures. Earth was beautiful in a way that surprised him. Green and alive and ancient. Home to the species they'd treated so poorly. The Council delegation had arrived 3 weeks ago. They'd sent requests for meetings every single day. Every request had been denied. They'd been told to wait, so they waited. Some of the delegates complained about the delay, calling it insulting. Thress silenced them quickly. They had no right to complain about anything. Finally, on the 22nd day, a message came. Ambassador Yuna would see them. They were led to a simple conference room in Geneva. No grand chamber like the Council had, just a plain room with a table and chairs. Yuna sat at one end, flanked by Admiral Minho and several other human representatives. She looked older than Thress remembered, tired in a way that went deeper than lack of sleep. "Ambassador Yuna," Thress began, standing because sitting felt wrong. "Thank you for seeing us." She nodded once but said nothing. Thress had practiced this speech for weeks. He'd revised it dozens of times, trying to find words adequate for what needed to be said. Now, standing in front of the humans they'd wronged, all his careful words felt hollow. "We were fools," he said simply. "For 142 years, your people served the Council with dedication we didn't deserve. You built our infrastructure. You solved our problems. You saved our lives. And we treated you like servants instead of partners." He pulled up data displays showing the devastating statistics. "Since you left, 5,317 beings have died from preventable causes. Medical emergencies without human doctors. System failures without human engineers. Starvation without human logistics. Wars without human mediators. Every single death is our responsibility." Wars. The human representatives watched silently. Their faces showed no emotion. They'd learned that from years of being ignored, how to hide what they felt. "We reduced your representation when we should have increased it," Thress continued. "We dismissed your contributions when we should have celebrated them. We took your generosity and treated it as obligation. We had a gift, and we threw it away through arrogance and blindness. He placed a data chip on the table. This contains a new charter. 15 council seats for humanity, more than any other species. Permanent veto power on all council decisions. Full recognition and compensation for all past contributions. Complete intellectual property rights for all human innovations. Autonomous human sectors with independent governance. A memorial listing every human who died, serving the council without recognition. Thress met Yuna's eyes. We're offering you everything we should have given you from the beginning. We're begging you to return. Not because we deserve your help, but because we need it. And because thousands more will die if you don't. The room fell silent. Thress could hear his own heartbeat, rapid and anxious. Everything depended on this moment. The future of 73 worlds rested on whatever Yuna said next. Why should we return? Yuna asked quietly. It was the question Thress had dreaded. He had no good answer, no reason that would satisfy what justice demanded. Because we need you, he admitted, and because we finally understand what we had. That's not a reason, Yuna replied. That's a confession of your own failure. Yes, Thress agreed. It is. Yuna stood and walked to the window. Outside, Earth continued its ancient dance around the sun, unconcerned with galactic politics. For 142 years, we tried to build something beautiful. A community of species working together. We believed in that dream so strongly that we gave everything to make it real. She turned back to face them. And you crushed that dream through simple neglect. You didn't hate us. You just didn't see us. Somehow, that hurt more. I know, Thress said. And I'm sorry. Those words are inadequate, but they're all I have. Yuna looked at Admiral Minho. Some silent communication passed between them. Then, she looked at the other human representatives. They nodded. One by one. We'll discuss this, Yuna said finally. Come back in 3 days. The delegation left, carrying more hope than they'd arrived with, but still uncertain. 3 days felt like 3 years. On the third day, they returned to the same conference room. The human delegation was larger this time, including representatives from the Human Commonwealth government. Yuna sat at the center, a document in front of her. We've made a decision, she announced. Humanity will return to the council, but not on the terms you offered. Thress felt his hope collapse. They'd asked for too much. The humans would refuse entirely. Your terms were too small. Yuna continued, surprising him. You offered us seats and power within the existing structure. But that structure is broken. It allowed this disaster to happen. We won't return to repair a fundamentally flawed system. She slid the document across the table. These are our terms. We'll help you build a new station, Station Unity. But it will be designed from the ground up as a true partnership. Joint leadership between humans and all other species. Rotating council prime positions. Mandatory recognition protocols for all contributions. Transparent accounting of who does what work. Independent oversight to prevent exploitation of any species. Admiral Minho spoke next. We'll provide the engineering expertise to build this station. We'll share our medical knowledge, our logistics systems, our mediation techniques. But we'll do it as equals teaching equals, not as servants fixing your mistakes. Another human representative continued. All human intellectual property will be protected under enforceable law. Research belongs to researchers unless they choose to share. Voluntary contributions are recognized as gifts, not obligations. No species will be expected to give endlessly without acknowledgement. Yuna placed another item on the table, a design for a memorial. At the heart of Station Unity, we'll build a monument. It will list every being from every species who contributed to the Council without recognition. Humans, yes, but also members of other species who were taken for granted. It will be called the Silent Workers. And every child from every species will learn its lesson. What lesson? Thress asked. That the people who keep your world running deserve your respect, Yuna replied. That essential work is valuable work, even when it's invisible. That saying thank you costs nothing but means everything. She looked at each delegate in turn. These are our terms. All of them. Non-negotiable. Accept them completely, or we stay home, and you solve your own problems. Thress didn't need to consult with the others. We accept. Every term. Every condition. Everything. Relief and shame warred on his face. Relief that humanity would help. Shame that it had taken such disaster to learn basic decency. 5 years later, Station Unity floated in space where Nexus Prime had once been. The old station had been abandoned, left as its own kind of memorial to failed dreams. The new station gleamed with purpose and hope. Engineer Sora stood in the central environmental control room, training a young Draxian engineer named Koth. She explained the life support systems patiently, making sure he understood not just the procedures, but the reasoning behind them. Why do you check the secondary filters every night? Koth asked. The manual says weekly inspections are sufficient. Because I've seen what happens when you rely only on schedules, Sora replied. Systems don't fail on convenient timelines. You have to listen to them. Feel them. The manual gives you the baseline. Your judgment gives you excellence. Will you teach me to listen like you do? Sora smiled. That's why I'm here. In the medical wing, Dr. Taeyang taught a class of students from 8 different species. He showed them his cross-species surgical techniques, the research he'd kept private for so long. Now he shared it freely, because these students understood it was a gift, not an entitlement. My teacher once told me, Taeyang said, that the greatest knowledge means nothing if you hoard it, but it also means nothing if people don't value it. True learning requires both generosity and gratitude. A young Quillen student raised her hand. How do we show proper gratitude? By learning well, Taeyang replied. By teaching others in turn. By remembering that someone took time to help you grow. That's gratitude. Passing it forward. Admiral Minho walked through the station with Commander Vex, now his co-leader of Unified Defense Forces. They'd been adversaries once. Now they worked together, combining human tactical flexibility with Draxian discipline. I still don't understand how we missed it, Vex admitted. How we didn't see what humans were doing. People rarely notice the foundation of their house until it cracks, Minho replied. You were living on the upper floors, enjoying the view. We were in the basement, maintaining the structure. And you let us stay ignorant? No, Minho corrected. We tried to be partners. You chose to see us as servants. There's a difference. They reached the central plaza where the memorial stood. Massive and beautiful, it listed thousands of names in hundreds of languages. Beings who'd contributed to the old council without recognition. Humans made up perhaps 30% of the names. The rest were from dozens of species individuals who'd done essential work and been ignored. A group of children from various species stood before the memorial, their teacher explaining its significance. These people kept the galaxy running, the teacher said. They fixed what was broken. They solved what was hard. They did it quietly, without demanding praise. We honor them because we should have honored them while they lived. A small human child raised her hand. Will we leave again if people forget? The teacher, a Thausian, considered the question seriously. I don't know. That depends on whether we remember what happened when humans left before. It depends on whether we keep saying, thank you. Whether we keep noticing the people who do essential work. She looked at all the children. Every one of you will grow up to do important work. Some of you will be famous. Others will do quiet, essential jobs that nobody notices. Both kinds of work matter. Both deserve respect. Remember that. And maybe nobody will need to leave to teach us that lesson again. Ambassador Yuna, now semi-retired, sat in her quarters watching the sunset through the massive observation windows. Earth hung in the distance, blue and beautiful. Home was only 2 days away now instead of 37 light years. That felt right. A message appeared on her terminal. It was from young Ji-won, a newly arrived human engineer fresh from Earth. He'd sent a photo of himself standing before the memorial with a group of alien colleagues. They were all smiling. They asked me if humans would leave again. Ji-won's message read, I said it depends on whether they remember what our silence taught them. What do you think, Ambassador? Will they remember? Yuna thought about the question for a long time. Then she typed her response. Some will forget. That's human nature and alien nature too. But enough will remember. And those who remember will teach the ones who forget. That's how wisdom works. Slow. Imperfect. But possible. She paused, then added one more line. We left to teach them our value. We returned to teach them partnership. The real question isn't whether they'll remember. It's whether we'll have the strength to leave again if they forget. She sent the message and returned her gaze to the stars. Out there, 73 worlds lived in peace. Not perfect peace, conflicts still arose. Problems still occurred. But now they faced those challenges together. With respect and recognition for all who contributed, the foundation was stronger now. Not because humans held everything together alone, but because everyone understood that foundations matter, that essential work deserves honor, that saying thank you isn't weakness, it's wisdom, and if they forgot that lesson, if they took their partners for granted again, well, humans had walked away once before. They could do it again, but Yuna hoped they wouldn't need to. She hoped this time the lesson would stick. Only time would tell.